What's up, everyone? Welcome to the next lesson. Today we are breaking down this image, and believe me or not, but almost all the models here were done using AI. Those furniture pieces do not exist anywhere else apart from Midjourney, and I know it's quite crazy. And this lesson is just to show you that creating 3D furniture from images is totally viable. It can be a lifesaver. And it's not perfect, and you need to have a special workflow for it, but we will show you some possibilities today. Let's get right into it. So we'll run a quick time-lapse of different furniture pieces and give additional comments as we go. We are using Photoshop and Tripole 3D. We covered the workflow a couple of lessons ago. Definitely check that out if you haven't already. The first thing is to prepare the images. We keep the furniture without any context shadows or similar objects. Usually we do it in Photoshop, typically starting with the select subject. Sometimes it works like a charm, but often than not, we need to tweak the selection. Regardless, it's super duper quick. Once we have the object on a white background, we can upload it to Tripole 3D as a reference image. We can also upload multiple images actually, if we have different angles, but single image is enough to create a complete 3D model, and Tripole will fill in the parts that are not visible in the render. So sometimes, of course, it will be not so great, and Tripole will come up with something weird, but for the very least, it will be correct from the angle, the same as 2D image is. More often than not, we get a complete 3D model, but yeah, something you should keep in mind. And here we can also get the PBR textures, quite convincing. So that's the first one. Moving on, we do the same for the other objects in the scene. For these chairs, it's essentially the same method. Select the object, then we can refine the selection, remove the background, and the object is ready for generation. When it comes to the model generation process, it's essentially streamlined and it's the same every time. In theory, Tripole offers access to the two models for generating 3D objects. In practice, we use the latest one with the HD textures option. It gives the best structural and anatomical results. But if you need to test the older one, it's more consistent with the image. So yeah, that's a trade-off you can make. And yeah, here's another example. We have a table which has some objects on top of it. We want to cut them out. So we can make the Photoshop fill in the gaps again, actually very quick and 100% effective. Generally, when working with objects like these, Firefly should be your great ally, and eventually we run this image to Tripole again and we get the 3D model in return. So the simplest way, same process every time. Here we have yet another example when some manual cleaning is necessary again. We need to remove the pillows and generate the back of the sofa in a way that it looks reasonably believable and consistent with the seat. In this case, there's a little bit of back and forth. All of a sudden, Firefly, isn't cooperating with us as willingly as before. It kind of replaces the cushions with other cushions. Sometimes we need to use this guided generation, but eventually we can guide it towards a cushion-free direction. And the whole process takes longer, but eventually we get to the place we want. Last few tweaks, adjusting the geometry, and it's done. You can see that 3D model is quite decent. We can use it in our rendering, or if you like, you can also further remodel it and detail it out. So that's something you should always consider. We also generate a lamp. It's based on a single image, and it's the same way again. You can see there's a lot of potential objects you can generate. This happens very often in clients' work. You have some image randomly took from an antique store or any other store. There are many things obstructing our main object, a lot of unnecessary clutter. But again, Firefly is our great ally. We can clean it up, we can do it without any thinking, and Firefly will just simply understand the context. And just like before, we get a beautiful model here. You can play around with the mesh to get different meshes. Again, we encourage you to test different options. I think there's already a variety of examples just to open your minds to different possibilities you can use Tripole for. And take a look at this. Here's an extreme example of what Tripole 3D can somewhat handle. This is a little bit weird because it's a combination of two worlds. One that is very rigid with this metal frame, and the other one is pretty organic. And overall, okay, it's not perfect, but when you look at it, it doesn't even have a correct perspective or geometry because it comes from Midjourney. Right now in Tripo can somewhat handle it and fix those imperfections. It can result in a simple metal frame, and inside there's like some kind of a blobby monstera, you know? In this approach, we don't need everything that should be perfect. Maybe we can use it in the background. Maybe it can actually work. So we will see how we bring some details back in just a moment. Remember, there is always Magnifique or other creative upscalers that can perfectly transform any plant into something super realistic. Okay guys, what a time to be alive, you know? Okay, that's it for asset generation. You get the gist of it, what's possible, how to handle it, and definitely recommend trying it out. Next up, we will go immediately into post-production. We have our standard lighting setup. We discussed it in the Mediterranean scene, so we will move on to the more interesting part. You know, Tripo models aren't perfectly perfect. They won't come up as crisp and as sharp as we used to having them, the traditional high-level 3D models in the raw rendering, so we need to rely on post-production more to increase their production quality up to standards we are used to. So there will be many different techniques to recover details. The raw render isn't perfect, it's missing a lot of this sharpness, so I think it's best to see this in practice. Let's go through this step by step. Okay, we'll start with the console, and right from the start, you might not even consider it, but best is just to transplant the details from an original photo. This is like a blasphemy if you're a 3D guy, but if you're a matte painter, it's like no big deal. So we cut out fragments, flip it, and simply place it on top. You can trim it to the mask, and basically there it is. And in this case, we don't even need to delight the highlight. It fits the scene kind of nicely. If you need to change it though, you can use some dodge tools, you can use some burn tools, and you can adjust it a little bit more. But roughly, the detail comes back. So we do the same for this frame. Of course, the geometry here doesn't fit quite well. We need to transform it a little bit, but soon enough, we have our details back. Remember, we will also run it through creative upscalers, and that will add a lot of details later on. If something feels low res or a bit blurry at this stage, that's fine. We can do the same for the bench. Mainly, we want to restore those densely grooved elements at the bottom of the bench. So we will copy this element a few times, bend it, and that detail should start to stand out. We use the burn tool this time to adjust the lighting. We can always lower the opacity of it a bit. It fits more or less without much effort on our part, so that's kind of cool. We even let Firefly generate some additional metal reflections. That's also allowed, who cares? Remember that it's all about the final 2D image. There's situations when you don't need 100% control in 3D, you can fix it in post, even get whole details in post, which were never in 3D rendering ever before. Traditional matte painting techniques, and you should be familiar with them 100%. Next up, we have a different technique, something that we used a long time ago with the church example. We are starting to modify the wall. We have a few different renderings, each with different concrete material applied. And here we started with something basic. And in certain areas around the sculpture, we introduce different types of concrete. This breaks up the uniformity and makes the scene feel more rich and unique. Such a great technique when you don't have time to spend hours perfecting shaders. And here you've got a full creative control to add details where it matters. And later, Magnifique will take those details and push them even further. And next up, this will be a longer section, but the idea will be the same. We will change most of the furniture. We rendered multiple different materials for those, and we will slowly brush them in here and there. Now the same for the wood. Of course, there are a few more steps here. First off, we use a render with this burned wood applied. We brush it in. Actually, we use the same material to the seats, especially along these edges. We do this for several different objects to introduce some variety. And just to sum it up, you can render different images with different woods, concretes, plasters, and take those bits and pieces of them to create unique materials that have this extra depth to them. You don't need to think that, okay, since Tripo generated this, that's what I'm stuck with. Okay, so next up, we focus on the tropical wood in the background. Same goes for this part. We have additional woods rendered out. This should help to get more fidelity. Apart from the normal tripod texture, again, we masked some orange tropical wood. We do the same for the bench seat so that the orange line repeats here as well. We also tweak some parts that were too black in the rendering, some minor fixes. Remember that you can always fix some parts with Firefly as well, so, any tricks are good. We are doing a few things with masks, adjusting the brightness for the sofa, nothing major though. And moving on, this is a cool case. Before, we used different renderings to Frankenstein this wall, but now we will use different metals for the sculpture. So we have a few metallic shaders here. Those are something straight from the Cosmos library, just a variety of metals. Some of them are like more glossy, some less. And then, the same as we did with the woods and walls, we can brush some parts in. Mainly those edges, which are nicely catching the specular highlights. I think it adds a lot of nuance in that area, so that's a great workflow again. Really quick and dirty one. Next up, a couple of additional minor adjustments. A little adjustment to the blanket. It doesn't feel right, like it feels pretty tiny, so we make it longer manually. In the model, it was just a blob, so we didn't want to deal with it in 3D. We would rather do it here with Firefly, and it's still quite rough and thin, but we will handle it directly in Magnifique. We are also fixing those holes in the plants, so these potted plants look more like a complete form. And almost there, now's the final phase, and time to go to Magnifique. So again, we can select an area, Ctrl J to duplicate, and create new layers. And separately for the carpet, sofa, metal element, and all the wooden elements. And this time we will have many different passes. We will target those separately with prompts, so that should give us the best results. This is how we want to bring details back. Fast forward, we have all the passes done. We'll give some additional comments as we put them together. Okay, so for the entire image, we do 2x upscale. Standard settings, 3 creativity and -1 HDR without prompt this time. This is our typical consistency pass. We also run the whole image, this time with half resolution and 4x upscale. Perhaps we might use it somewhere where consistency isn't as important, especially around the plants. For the smaller areas, we set the creativity a bit higher, up to 5, and we lower the resemblance to -5. This should allow for much greater freedom. We do 4x upscale and with prompts telling AI what it should be. For example, the blanket should be fluffy, so we write fluffy blanket. The wooden furniture should be and does, like typical, not complicated prompts, but just focus on that specific element. We have a few of these Magnifique results. The higher creativity is useful for plants, while the lower one helps to introduce some detail without too much modification. I use it on vases, some elements of the seating, cushions, and so on. The smaller creativity doesn't introduce many changes, but it adds fidelity, which is much more pleasant. We just look where there's too much of it and tone it down. We remove the upscaler pass from the white walls, which are starting to look worn out. We just want to keep them nice and clean in 3D, just like they were before. For those more organic elements, the gain is really huge. As you can see, the wood benefits a lot. Of course, the furniture. For now, it's just an initial layer, but yeah, already there's a huge sense of improvement. You can see how nicely the bark gains thickness. We also have those targeted regions, like the armchairs, table, the console, and so on. We have some additional rough furniture, it adds a lot. Metal gains a lot. When we upscale this specific part with a metal prompt, we certainly gain even more details. Okay, one unfortunate thing is that the sofa is like a hallucination town. Yeah, the two cushions merge into one. Some seams start to pop out of nowhere, but again, we can mask this out and keep elements we want. Or perhaps we can use Firefly to remove those hallucinations, like both are fine. But one nice thing about those passes was that we kind of get that softness in the sofa that we didn't have in the rendering. And the same with the blanket, it's super duper soft. Now the same with the rug. The rug has a lot of potential for hallucinations, but if you upload the rug area and type fluffy rug, it should be fine. And with that, basically, that's done. So that's that. I hope you like this little breakdown. And the biggest takeaway here is that making 3D furniture based off of 2D images is totally viable, and even commercially. You know, we use it all the time, so definitely try it out. But at the same time, you need to plan ahead. You need to plan how you're getting those details back. And at the same time, it's a little bit of a challenge to switch your brain and not to go 100% all in 3D. But yeah, eventually you can get those details and it looks absolutely spotless. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.